Welcome to Unpack the Trunk, the podcast that takes you under the hood of the automotive industry. We go beyond the business side, uncovering the personal journeys, lessons, and insights of the people driving this industry forward. From top executives to shop floor legends, we bring you the real stories behind the industry's biggest names. And now your host, 30-year industry leader and automotive expert, Dave Boyle.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first ever episode of my brand new podcast, Unpack the Trunk. I'm your host, David Boyle, and today we are in for a huge treat. As I was preparing for the inaugural podcast here, put my list together of potential guests who was going to be the first, and there was never any question who was going to be. It was going to be this guy on the screen next to me right here, the person that I often fondly refer to as the Les Silver, because I think he deserves that title. Not only been my boss for most of my adult life, my mentor for sure, my friend for sure. And I am just super excited about doing this today. We're going to have some fun. As you know, the Unpack the Trunk podcast is a little bit different. We're not going to talk a whole lot about all of his business accomplishments. We're going to talk a little bit about the man. But Les, welcome. Good to see you. You look great.
Well, I'm not sure about looking so great, but I'm here and kicking.
You're here kicking. Well, that's good. So listen, we get started here. I put together a list of something that I'd like to read to you. So, this is not the whole list, Les. I mean, I know this, and you could probably correct me a little bit, but I was sort of working through a list here. New Gen, MPI, Identifix, SRS, Keeps, Dynatron, Tricom, if I want to go pre-New Gen. I mean, there is a long, long list of companies that you've got your fingerprints all over in this business. And if you take it down a level and you look at some of the things that quite frankly, you pioneered, the first scheduling system, the first CRM system, service reminders, scheduled maintenance, digital inspections. I mean, the list is long, 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 long and illustrious. This is a dumb question, but you've got to be super proud of what you've accomplished in your life and particularly the impact that you've had on this industry.
I have enjoyed it a lot. The opportunity to look at the industry and step back. And that's really each one of the things that you mentioned got started with just a revelation because, it's an industry that hasn't innovated a whole lot over the course of the years. And if you had a chance to step back, which is fortunately what I've had a chance to do, you're often in a situation where you could say, why do they do it that way? And there's got to be a better way. And in most cases, there is. And I've had the opportunity to observe what's going on in the industry and step back and come up with a better way. Very often it involves technology. So technology, if applied properly, can make a huge difference in the way the business operates, more efficiently, more effectively, higher degree of quality. So applying technology, Dave, we got together way, 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 way back when.
30 years.
30 years.
Yeah.
And I've been playing with automotive technology going on 40 years. The things that we've been able to innovate were revolutionary in its time. And it really
is. You said something that it really is your superpower, Les. I mean, it was, I'll just give one example, but because there was many over the 30 years that you and I've known each other and the 20 plus that we worked together. I remember the day that you came into my office one day with a picture of a poster that you'd found of an airline pilot standing next. Remember that? Standing next to the engine of the airplane, and I think it was a Northwest Airlines.
Oh, actually, it was PSA.
It may have been. Yeah, see that? Yeah, you said your memory is going to be better than me on some of these things. It may have been PSA, which takes it back even further. But it was, and the caption read something to the effect of, you can rest easy when you fly with us because this guy does his 20-point inspection, whatever it was, before every flight. And you walked in my office, you handed me a piece of paper, and you said, imagine if we could convince the auto industry that they needed to inspect cars that way. And it was such a simple thing when I think back on it today, but it really was genius at the time. I mean, it opened up a whole industry, right?
And we called it the airline style safety inspection.
We did. We did. And we made up posters, if you remember. In fact, I remember
We made a poster, including the guy that was interviewed. It was a technician that worked for BSA. And he was asked, if you treated your car the way you would an airplane, what would you do?
Yep.
And he went through, here's the things you would change and expect and inspect. And his closing line was, if you did that, your vehicle would operate for 100,000 miles.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember.
And,
Oh my God. Wow. It's crazy when you think back on that stuff.
well, and the posters, we didn't track him down. We didn't ask for his permission. But I don't know to this day whether anybody that he knew ever saw him with a poster in a car dealership with that Q&A. But it was taking that simple idea.
Right.
And by and large, we built a business around it.
Yep.
Just
Yep.
that one idea.
Yeah, it was, I don't want to get sidetracked on this, but I was talking to a new company. I think you may know them a little bit in Chicago. That's getting started in the technician scheduling space. And I was talking to them earlier this week and their CEO, and I had such a wonderful conversation with him about, walking down memory lane from, that was the first job that I ever had. My first real job, if you remember, was working for Nugen. In fact, you didn't hire me. Dave Wood did, if you recall. But my first job was going around the country teaching dispatchers and people how to use, our scheduling system back in Canada, which was amazing. So listen, I think I know the answer to this question, but as I was prepping these questions, I thought, I'm not sure about this one. So, I mean, listen, I'm a car guy. Everybody, I think, knows that. I mean, before I got in this business, I spent 9 years as a professional race car driver. I've been around cars my whole life. You're not. So what got you into the industry?
I'm the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. What got you into this industry and how? Like, explain that to people. Like, did it happen by accident or?
Semi by accident. I graduated from college with a math degree. What do you do with a math degree? Not much of anything. But stumbled onto a computer science course in my final year and thought that's probably a field that's going to have some potential. So I decided to go back to school and take a master's in computer science. In order to do that, though, I needed to catch up on the number of classes that I took. So the school gave me the ability to go part-time I went for a year and a half, part-time, weekends, evenings, and got enough credits to be able to get into graduate school. So it really was the computer science side of things that got me into the business. I worked for a company that was a consulting company called System House. And I was asked to go and do a speech at a conference in Copenhagen way back when, probably in the early 70s, mid 70s. And my premise was that you can't rely on the technology if you don't have the people that make it happen. And they really, there was an example of a bank that installed a banking system in the various branches, and half of them failed and half of them succeeded. Same software, same program, same training program, but what made them successful? It turned out that it was the people and it was the implementation of the process that made the huge difference. And I realized that if I applied that principle to the automotive industry, and I kind of stumbled onto the automotive industry uh, while I was taking these classes and trying to get myself accredited to go back to school. I worked in a dealership selling cars, and
I remember this part of the story.
well, I, like you said, I'm not a car guy when it comes to tell me how to open the hood. I could probably do that part. That's about all. But by giving us the opportunity and giving the business the opportunity to do a lot of training as a component of the systems that we sold, we were probably the first to really bundle ongoing training, ongoing consulting, along with software. And it was that combination that was the difference. This was the software was shop scheduling. It was Tricom and NewGen, and they delivered or developed a system by at IBM. I'm sorry, not IBM, at General Motors. And it fails because people didn't use it. So we simply said, we're going to be the company where we're going to provide the support to make sure that if you buy something, you use it to its potential, and it'll deliver on the results. And that was our concept. That was probably the most significant defining concept we had, was that of utilization and training and ongoing support.
It really was the thing that made us stand out at NewGen. And I remember back in the day, that was my first job, was doing the training component, as you know, and it really was the differentiator for us, right? Because we would sell these systems that weren't cheap back in those days, as you know, but we sold them as a package to go in and support them. And I remember, when we launched CRM, going in and training all the CRM managers on, how to make phone calls and how to manage your lists and how to run the program. And it really was, I think, one of the things that was was a differentiator for us back in the marketplace. So I'm going to this little side question on this. So there's a story that I heard at one point, if I remember correctly, about a purple, was it a Dodge Dart or something? Where did that car, was that when you were working at the dealership? Where did that car come in? Because I bet you wish you had that car today.
Well, this was the most stripped down. It was a Dodge Dart Swinger, purple, 1970, I believe. The all-in price was $2,566. I remember it like today. And
Unbelievable.
it didn't have a radio. That's how stripped out it was. It had a on the floor stick, 3-speed transmission, and
6-cylinder engine.
six-cylinder engine, and it was purple. And that was the color in those days. That was a hot color.
Oh yeah.
You know, and a lot of much better equipped Dodge Darts were around. But well, for 2566, you can imagine what you get.
Yeah, I bet.
It wasn't much.
Unbelievable. So I touched on a little bit that obviously my first job was working for you and at NewGen in Toronto. And I remember when Dave Wood hired me, I remember my first day, they were, getting me ready and getting me onboarded, if you will. And they stuck me in an office that I think may have been your old office. Because there was a picture of you and what I found out later to be a couple of car dealers. And I think you may have been at the golf course in Toronto. And, you had one of your cow pie hats on. I remember it. And I remember, your name came up, but you and I didn't meet for a while, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I found out later that one of the reasons you and I didn't meet for a while was that you were in Detroit, I believe, a lot of the time, sort of getting what we found out later to be sort of, NewGen back up on his feet, if you will. We had a lot of success with that company, but it did fall on some hard times at one point, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was an example of putting too many eggs in one basket. We developed a really great relationship with General Motors, and the software that we had been selling actually was developed by General Motors in their tech center in Warren, Michigan. And at the time, capacity, technicians being able to do things more efficiently was the issue of the day, right? Cars were lined up in the morning, just all the way to the street. And General Motors decided that they would spend the time and money developing software that allowed for the optimization of the workflow and the capacity. It was SOS was the name of the system.
Yeah, I remember.
Service order scheduling.
Yep.
And they built it to run on a mini computer. There were real-time systems were unheard of. And they built it and didn't know what to do with it. They weren't in the business of being in the software business themselves. So they told the industry, hey, if you guys want this software, give us $1 and the software is yours. And it was a real-time system. And, there were 2 companies who I had already taken that software and built businesses on it. And at the time, the computers themselves, when you say they were expensive, they were in the $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 range.
I remember. Yeah.
Just for the computer. And then you had the software and you had the installation. It was a major thing that people had to commit to. And some of the really top dealerships, they realized that it was essential, and then they jumped in and did it. Several of the companies, one was called Balance Computers, the other was called Tricom, was the one that I hooked up with. And I became the Canadian distributor for Tricom. That's how I got started back in the industry. They themselves in the U.S., they were based out of San Diego or San Francisco, and they ran into some real trouble. And I was able to buy their company, their U.S. company, really for a song. And that became the core of the entry into the United States. And we had 400 or 500 customers.
Right.
So it was pretty significant. And we took what we did in Canada, the training, the support, and took that into the U.S. And that turned out to be the magic bullet.
Right. Yeah. No, I remember all those days, and I remember the contract with GM that didn't quite pan out, and we sort of jumped ship from GM to Ford almost. It seemed right back in that day when we did that. We did that sort of consulting project for Ford. In fact, that was when you and I really first met. If you remember back then, and it was I tell people
service improvement process.
Yep. I remember I told people all the time that obviously you gave me my break, and I had worked at the company for a bit, obviously in Toronto, and I was quite happy to have a paycheck and bought my first new car, which was green, by the way, to go along with your purple, and those colors were popular back in those days. And there was a project, if you remember, you put the program together with Ford Motor Company, and there was, I think, 6 or 7 pilot dealers. And if I remember correctly, I think I was supposed to go to Florida, and someone else was supposed to come. It may have been, I think, Dick Orsini or one of those guys were supposed to come to California, and they got into a car accident or something at the last minute. And I got the call to go to California, where I got the opportunity to work with you the whole week. And I think, was it Joe McPherson Ford? Was that, does that ring a bell?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it was, so I told people all the time.
He was a character. He was
tough guy. I remember.
We went to do that. Sorry for interrupting. after we had done the assignment, it was a 1-week consulting assignment where we defined, I think there were about 10 processes, and we did workshops and we did it all. And at the end, we went and presented it to the dealer. And Joe McPherson gave us the time only to harass us.
I know.
He wasn't interested at all in finding out what we did.
Yeah.
He just wanted to yell at the regional manager who was along with us.
Yeah.
I
I was sitting in that meeting. I remember thinking, I need to rethink what I'm doing for a living because this is quite painful. But, I tell people all the time that that was sort of my big break, right? Because I got an opportunity to work with you, and I got an opportunity to show you some of the things that I could do in running some of these workshops and whatnot. And that ultimately parlayed in an opportunity for me with New Gen, sort of the reincarnated New Gen when we moved to San Diego. And it was sort of the big break in my career, that's for sure. So, of all the businesses that you've, been around, is there one thing that you can, point to that was sort of your big break or your big win? Or, you had so many of them. I know it's probably hard to go to one, but what was the thing that you think sort of turned things around for you?
Well, the shop scheduling and loading, that whole business um, really did turn itself into a pretty good business. Uh, uh, we ended up selling it, and the new buyer didn't have a passion for much of anything. Uh, uh, so after having completed the assignments of, I had a non-compete, and I sort of stuck around and did that for a while. But when we went into the CRM space, that probably was, we had a couple hundred dealers in the scheduling. We had thousands of dealers in the CRM space.
Yep.
It got up to be about 7,000 dealers.
Yep.
So, and we were ahead of the game. And very fortunately, we were able to parlay that into a major opportunity.
Yeah. Those were the days. And I remember if you think, I bet you, if you think back now there's not that many vendors that can say that they have that many dealers, when and we really monopolized, a big chunk of the industry back then. When you think about it, I mean, we had half the car dealers, in the US, on that CRM program. It was pretty amazing. So shifting gears for a second. So I mentioned in my opening remarks that I sort of view you as my mentor, or certainly one of my mentors in business and in a lot of things. Do you have someone you consider in that role? Who's your mentor?
Well, there was a guy who was my boss at the company before I even got back into the car business at System House, named Keith Soley. And he was my boss and taught me a lot of life lessons as well. You may recall we called our 6-pack for success.
Correct.
And, there were just lessons that fortunately I was able to learn pretty early that were like changing. Keith used to say, you want to, set yourself up where you're shooting high, but this is weird, by the way. I just got a text message from Keith.
Did you really?
It just popped up
Oh, wow.
onto the screen.
Oh, wow.
Hey, wherever he is, he's back. He's back actually to Canada. But he used to say, strive for the stars, and if you get to the moon, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because you really do want to have high expectations, and you want to turn them into as big an opportunity as you possibly can. And fortunately, the businesses that you talked about, just right place, right time.
Right.
The scheduling system, the CRM system, the capability to be able to modify behavior so that the dealers were providing, it was fundamental, provide great
Right.
service to the customers. And eventually they would appreciate it and come back for more.
Yep.
And that's what we were able to do.
Do you remember the phrase? And I don't want to get waylaid on this because we'll run out of time. But you remember the phrase "friend in the car business"?
Yep. Yep.
You know,
It's,
I remember having conversations with you over dinner one night, and several conversations about, because we were in the business, so to speak. We got treated differently, right? I remember when we were living in San Diego and we bought cars from our friend Ed Witt. Who I'll take 2 seconds and give a shout out to Ed and prayers to his son Todd, who's struggling, as you know. We're all praying for him. We got treated differently. When we needed to take our car in for service, I would take my car down and drop my keys on Ed's desk, and there'd be a loaner waiting for me. And we skirted all the processes. And I remember you saying to me one day, wouldn't it be great if everyone could experience what we experience? And that is having a friend in the car business that can, make things, today they call it frictionless, right? But to make things easier, for us. And we sort of had that. Shifting gears a second here, as I mentioned, I've been around you 30 plus years, and I've got to know on the family side of Les. You have 3 boys, 3 great kids who I know very well. Hopefully Lee's listening to this. I'm going to give him a warning. I'm not going to talk anything about his temper on the golf course. That's long history. But your 3 boys have been very successful, in walking in your footsteps, if you will. And it's got to be satisfying that towards the end of your career, you had a chance to work with all 3 of them, right? I guess in different businesses. So
that was the most gratifying part of everything that I was able to do, was to be able to, not only get it done, but have the support of the kids and the family to help me get it done. And, they were strong. And very proud of how they were able to come on.
you should be. I talked to Lee at NADA this year, just briefly, and he's turned into, he worked for me in a number of capacities at SRS, if you recall. And, it was, I was that, I got sort of saddled with the boss's kid, if you will. And he was a handful in more than one way. But man, he's turned into a pretty, special entrepreneur in his own right. He's done such a great job over there at Dynatron, as I know, and it's been great. So, here's a question, either the kids or just in general, if you were going to give one piece of advice to some young entrepreneur today, what would it be?
Execution. It's always about execution. And you take whatever idea that you have, polish it, understand it in detail, and execute like hell. That's ultimately what you need to do to be able to make it work. And do it in an area where there's a value proposition that's compelling. Because at the end of the day, you're only going to be successful if the customer gets a good return on their investment. And fortunately, in all the businesses I had, there was quantifiable, easily identifiable ROI. And if you have that, then you've got a chance. Otherwise, it just won't work out.
I think, and listen, we didn't invent management reports, but I think one of the things that I personally felt most proud of when you and I were at MPI SRS was the type of reporting that we pulled together. It was really sort of, in my mind, it was revolutionary at the time, right? I mean, the type of data that we were able to pull together and give to our customers was really, it was a bit groundbreaking, I think, at the time, and it really made us stood apart, right? I mean, we had dashboards and stuff everybody has today, but not most of the companies, in the vendor space weren't doing that kind of stuff until we came along. It was one of the things that I finally remember back to was that.
Well, getting the data and making it meaningful definitely was a key to that.
Yep, for
But
sure.
translating it into action and making sure that everybody that's responsible for something understands what it is and understands that you're not doing this for fun. You're doing this because an investment was made, and that investment needs to have a return if it's going to be satisfactory for everybody. And it's for the customer, for the dealership, for all the employees. Profit isn't a dirty word. The dealership needs it to survive. You need it to keep your job. So being able to do that well and execute is the key.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. So you're probably, at least in the last 30, 40 years, you're probably one of the most, well-known guys in this industry, I think. And a lot of people know you, and I certainly know you very well, know all the things that you've accomplished. And you were an avid golfer. You were I wouldn't call it an avid gambler, but you were a weekend gambler back in the day, which you and I could tell some stories about that we won't. But and now golf courses too. I got to play some amazing golf courses thanks to you over my life. So here's a question: Tell me something that most people don't know about you, or shock me and tell me something that I don't know about you.
Now that's the question. I'm an open book.
Yeah. Any hobbies we don't know about? Any passions that we don't know about? Golf and working.
Yeah, that pretty much. I was an avid golfer. Unfortunately, I've got some problems with my hand, and I've had to give it up. But my golfing passion got passed down to the kids,
Right.
and you know, two of them at least uh, got to go to the university on golf scholarships, largely because I gave them the bug.
Yeah.
They had the skill, but I had the passion for it.
Yeah.
And watching them playing, and they were avid for sure.
Well, and I know you've had issues with your hand, but I can tell you that I've seen you play with one hand before. In fact, I saw you hit a almost perfect wedge shot one day, and you had your BlackBerry up against your shoulder like this and a hot dog in your mouth. And you swung with one hand. And I remember that. We were at what's that golf course in Carlsbad there in California? I'm going to not remember it, but Aviera. We were Aviera. Yep. And I saw you make a one-handed, sort of left-handed swing because you didn't want to drop your phone, and you were
or the hot dog.
Or the hot dog. You were on the phone and eating and swinging at the same time, which was, we have there's lots of fond California memories that I tell people the story about my lobster payroll deduction all the time. It was one of the best stories. I'm not going to go down that path, but if anybody wants to give me a call and hear that story, it is one of the best Les Dave stories out there. And
if you want to impress your boss, don't buy $185 lobster.
Buy $185 lobster. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that one and the two rental cars was getting damaged, and then you looked at me and said, "Well, you're the car guy. Fix it before we take it back to the rental car." And I remember I was in my suit laying in the parking lot of Jaguar, I think, trying to put the bumper back on a Ford Taurus. But anyway, we have certainly had our fun. So a couple of questions here, and then we'll wrap this up. So at the beginning of this podcast, I put the word "the" in front of your name because I say that with reverence. I think you're one of the guys in this industry, and there's been a lot of guys that have done a lot of great things in this industry. Give me the name of somebody else who you think deserves that title of "the." Who else in this industry is somebody that you look up to as somebody that's accomplished a ton of stuff.
Well, I would actually say, I mean, you may not even be aware of the fact that our space in Dallas is leased from a guy named John Traver.
I was really hoping you were going to say John Trey because he would have been the guy I would have picked too. And yes, now that I live here in Dallas, John and I become really good friends. So I do know that your space is
He's our landlord,
yeah.
and he's just a great guy. And the things that he's done in the spaces that he's carved out for himself and for his associates is fabulous.
It's amazing. It's every time I talk to him, by the way, too, I learn something else about him. I had the great fortune of hitching a ride to NADA after every flight got canceled, on the private with him. And we got a chance to sit on the plane and talk, not about the car business, but about his ranching business. I had no clue. I mean, I knew he was in the business, but I had no clue. I mean, he's not a gentleman rancher. He's a real rancher. I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing the things that he's accomplished. And there's probably 3 or 4 guys that I would put on that list with thee. And certainly, you're at the top of that list and he's right there too. And I really hope actually, I think I'm going to actually have him scheduled for the next broadcast. So it'll be great back to back to have you two guys. So, all right. One of the things that I did prior to this was I put a note out to all the LinkedIn followers that I have, and I said, "Give me a question that you want me to ask Les." And I mentioned you coming on. I got over 50, and some of them were from people that you and I know in our past, and were a little bit crazy, but there were some really good ones as well. And the who else deserved the title is the was one. And there was a second one that I'm going to ask because I think it's given what's going on in the industry and our world in general right now. I think this is a question I'd like you to weigh in on. So with everything that's going on in the industry and in the world and tariffs and EVs and whatnot, what do you think is the biggest thing that the industry needs to be concerned about in the next decade?
Good question.
I mean, is it EVs less? I mean, are EVs just going to disappear given everything that's going on? I mean, it's not likely, but
No, I mean, I think like most things, they were overhyped. Uh, and, they will find their spot. People have asked me, do you have an EV? And I don't. And for me, the amount of range has been the big deterrent for me. And that will get solved with battery technology sometime in the next 5 years, I think. I think there will be a time when the vision of autonomous vehicles is going to be a reality. It's way longer than we expected, but sooner or later. And then there will be problems with it. But there's problems with
everything.
human driving cars.
Yep.
For
sure. For sure.
And now, I don't think that any of that is a threat. I think that's just all going to be opportunity. So I still remain very, very bullish, particularly on the service side of the auto industry. That there's more to be done before every customer thinks I was treated like a friend.
Yep.
And as long as that opportunity exists, there is an opportunity to do something that's of great significance.
So I agree with you completely. I was thinking about I asked myself this question when I wrote it down because I get asked this question quite a bit. I'm still active on the consulting side and whatnot. I work with dealers and talk to a lot of dealers every day. And I know there's a lot of people that are, afraid of what's going to happen with China and EVs and these low end EVs and higher range cars and all that stuff. And I personally think that the biggest threat to this industry is people, lack of people. lack of talent coming into the industry, I think is the biggest concern that we have. And I know, everyone likes to talk about the technician crisis. It goes way beyond a technician crisis. It's a service advisor crisis. It's a salesperson crisis. It's a cashier crisis. It's a general people crisis where I think this next generation of young humans isn't even considering this as a potential place for a career, if they even want a career. Too many people figure they could just, sit in front of TikTok and, post videos and somehow get paid for it and not really work for a living anymore. And I'm sounding like an old man as I say this, but I do think that people is the biggest concern that this industry has. And I think that if you go into a typical car dealership today, particularly in the service department, and look around, there's a lot more people that look like me and you than there are that look like our kids. Right. And I think that it's an aging out workforce that concerns me. Are we going to be able to attract quality people into this industry, for the years to come?
I think yes, but I think it's going to take a concerted effort by senior management to recognize the problem and to adjust hiring practices, adjust who are the target employees. How do you compensate them? How do you create an environment where they're happy to come to work?
Right.
And there are a lot of good dealers in this country.
There are.
And they will be the ones that will provide the guidance for the others. And I think it'll be a solvable problem. The fact that it's so necessary, I mean, how will you get by without a properly operating vehicle? How will you get from A to Z?
You won't. No. I had a guy tell me when I told him it was going to be people, I had a friend of mine in the industry who was on the tech side said, well, that's not a problem because, we're going to be, tech is going to replace a lot of the people. And, AI and bots and agents and artificial agents and all that kind of stuff. And I said to him, I remember something you said to me one day that over the years, I've written a lot of things down that you've said, but I remember writing this down. You said that the right approach to any business is the right blend of high tech and high touch. Yeah. And I know you believe that. And I've always believed it. I think it was one of the things that made us successful back in the day at NewGen, that we combined high tech with high touch with our consulting and our training offerings that we gave to the dealers. And I still believe that this ultimately is a customer service business. And I don't think you can, tech the people out of it. You can make the people more efficient and more effective, perhaps, with tech. And maybe you could then draw the line that you'll need less people. But you're not going to get rid of the people in this industry, in my opinion. It's a people versus people in the industry. And that's not going to change. At least I don't think.
I don't think so. I think that still will become those that do really great are the ones that master that ability. And it is an industry that, it's enormous.
Yep.
The opportunity to do a much better job is still there. So just roll up your sleeves and get at it.
Get it done. Yep. Get it done. Like you always said, remember one of the things that you had your 6-pack for success and the number 6 was just do it. And that came from Les Silver before Nike, everybody. So you remember that. Just do it was Les Silver's before it was Nike's. All right. Wrapping up.
If I could get a royalty on that,
then
I'd retire.
You'd retire. You're already retired. Come on. So I started doing this with my last podcast. We're done. We're almost done here. I started with my last podcast and it's so much fun. I used to love to watch Inside the Actor Studio where they interviewed a bunch of the celebrities and whatnot. And the host of that, James Lipton, ended every show with his rapid fire 5 questions. And I'd come up with my rapid fire 5 questions. So one word, quick answers. Tell me, I'm going to give you 5 questions and we're going to fire away at this. I think I may know the answer to this already, but was the purple Dodge Dart your first car or did you have something before that? What was your first car?
63 Pontiac Parisienne 4-door sedan.
Wow. Wish you had that car today. That car be worth some money. So what's in your garage today? We know you don't have an EV, but what's in your garage today? Don't be shy. Come on. I know there's a Bentley in there.
And there's a Bentley and there's a Lexus.
Good for you. Good for you. I've always aspired to be you, and I aspire to have a Bentley in my garage someday. If there's any Bentley dealers out there listening, I'll take a good deal. If you could choose a different career than being in this business, what would it be?
Wow.
Professional golfer? Been a great way to make a living, right?
I don't have the, I don't have the guts for that. That's too much. I, having found what I found, I'm just the luckiest guy around.
Yeah. Man, that's wonderful that you've, it's the old saying, do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life, right?
Yeah.
So you're one of the hardest working guys I've ever met. And I know it's because you loved every minute and every day. So last two, I think I may know the answer to this. So who do you admire most in our industry? Would it be Mr. Traver? You can say me if you want. That's okay too. Who do you admire most? Who do you look up to? Is there a dealer? Less?
No, Dynatron and Rome's as a company, have turned out to be probably the biggest home run that I've been involved in. Ray Branch was a guy that started Rome's, and he's unfortunately passed away. But he gave me the opportunity to work with him for several years, and he was strong. He was able to step back and look at the problems of the industry. And when it came to pricing and the other things that we focus on at Keeps and Rooms, Ray was an inspiration to make all that happen.
I only met him once, but he was a very cool guy. I only got a chance to meet him once years ago, but last question. What's your favorite thing about the car business? What do you love the most?
Just the everyday opportunity.
There is that, right?
There's no end to it.
Yeah. The biggest industry in the world. Every year you go to NADA and you see all of the supporting companies and people that are making their living, good livings in most cases, as a result of this industry. It's hard not to get excited about it. I was trying to think how many NADAs that I've been to. It's got to be 30 at least. And I went this year even in the worst of weather, and I love it. I just love to go to that thing and see all the new stuff and all the old stuff. And it's just, it's an amazing part of our business. So, well, Mr. Silver, this was fun. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. We're going to have to do this again, and we're just going to have to talk about some of the stories, because the lobster and the rental car stories are not even, that's the piece of the iceberg that's above the water, right? There's a whole lot more to some of those stories. Some of our Vegas stories on the golf course and whatnot were legendary, as they say. So, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time, and this has been fantastic. And for those of you that want to hear some of these additional little tidbits, feel free to reach out to me. I can be happy to share some of the Les Dave stories that we've had. And this episode will be dropping middle of next week. And look forward to the next one where as I said earlier, I'll be announcing it on LinkedIn probably tomorrow, I believe. Mr. Traver is going to be guest number 2, so that'll be fun. We'll see if he picks you as as one of his most admired guys in the industry as well. So anyway, Les, thank you much. Appreciate it. All the best to the family. Say hi to Andy, the boys, everybody. It's been great catching up and a little walk down memory lane. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Dave. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Talk to you soon.
Bye for now.
Bye.